Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this special presentation. Um, I want to welcome everyone joining live and via our recording on the web on YouTube. Today's webinar is about missing and murdered Indigenous people awareness with Haley Omeasoo. I'm your host for today, AJ Holder, and I'm honored to bring you this important conversation. We're so honored to have our speaker with us today, but before we begin, a quick note. We encourage you to get engaged by submitting your questions in the chat and or the live Q&A section. We'll try to get as many as possible during the discussion. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm a Yapi, Lakua Tau Choko Taui Machiapi, na Eswashichua Alexandra Holder Machiapi, Malakota na Kirikirish na Ho Changda Wiyaha Macha, Naha Yuan Chante Washte na Pech Yuzapi, Maikhade Raja Alexandra Holder Hingairena, Shahal Raja, Ta Choko Taui Hingairena, Ma Kedapananuk Naga Job Wa U Nongshana. Good Good afternoon from wherever you're joining. My name is Alexandra or AJ Holder. I'm a Lakota, Winnebago, Wichita, Second Fox, and Northern Cheyenne. I'm Programs Assistant for Native Initiatives here at SACNAS, and I'm so excited for this conversation today, and I want to thank you all for joining. Before we begin, or this is today's speakers. But before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the original stewards of the lands we occupy. We recognize that we are joining this conversation from many places, each with its own deep histories, cultures, and traditions shaped by Indigenous people. We honor the resilience, knowledge, and contributions of many Native nations and Indigenous communities past and present, who continue to care for these lands and whose legacies shape the world we live in today. This acknowledgement is a call to reflect, learn, and take action in supporting Indigenous voices and self-determination. We encourage you to take a moment to recognize the lands you are on and to learn about the Indigenous peoples whose lands you reside upon. If you'd like to learn more, we invite you to visit the link in the chat to explore the history and contemporary presence of Indigenous communities in your area. Before we welcome our speakers, I'd like to extend an invitation to you all to join SACNAS and be part of a thriving STEM community. At SACNAS, science, culture, and community are more than just words. They are the heartbeat of our organization. We create spaces where STEM students and professionals from historically excluded backgrounds feel a true sense of belonging, can embrace their intersectional identities, and are empowered to bring their whole selves into STEM. We invite you to become a SACNAS member today. As a member, you'll gain access to a network of diverse STEM professionals, develop opportunities, and membership and communities to support you grow in your STEM journey. Now, moving on to introduce our speaker today, we have the privilege of hearing from Haley Omeasoo, the founder and executive director of Ohkomi Forensics. Haley grew up on the Blackfeet Reservation in northwest Montana and graduated from Browning High School in 2015 with honors. In the fall of 2015, she began her undergraduate studies at the University of Montana, where she graduated in 2020 with a bachelor's in forensics anthropology and a Bachelor of Science in Human Biological Sciences with a certificate in forensic science. She then continued on at to graduate school at University of Montana, where she obtained her master's in forensics anthropology with honors, and is now on track to earn her PhD in forensics and molecular anthropology with honors this year. During this time, she founded Ohkomi Forensics, a nonprofit organization that provides forensic services to Indigenous communities and families affected by the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples crisis, and serves as the executive director aside from her newly founded business and research. Haley is a wife, mother, and mother of two boys and two dogs who enjoys reading, making regalia in her free time. I will now hand the virtual floor over to Haley.
Okay, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So, okinistuni danaku isamaki ni daibing singaxim Haley Omeasoo, ni mototo amska pipikanigi hopitua, ni mototo bunogasiki idanyop, ni sitatsuki matsoko Ohkomi forensics. Hello everyone, my name is Haley Omeasoo. Um, Today I will kind of be going into the backstory of what kickstarted Ohkomi forensics and kind of my journey to get to where I am today. So for Ohkomi forensics, Ohkomi means to use one's voice in Nisi Plochsen or the Blackfeet language. Um, I am a descendant of the Blackfeet tribe, and that's where I grew up, was on the Blackfeet reservation. But I am also an enrolled member of the Hopi tribe as well. Um, so our motto at Ohkomi Forensics is search, identify, rematriate, and this presentation will be on a multidisciplinary approach to combating the MMIP crisis. So a little bit of our story. Um, like I said, I grew up on the Blackfeet Reservation. That was where I met my husband, Vince Omeasoo, who is also Blackfeet and Ermineskin Cree. Um, my husband got his master's in business administration here at the University of Montana. And so together, we started this nonprofit back in 2023. So he is our financial manager. I'm the executive director. My sister-in-law got her bachelor's in marketing, and so she is our marketing manager. And then my mother, Monty, she runs her own business, her own nonprofit. And so she has kind of been guiding us as well throughout this journey to kind of help us develop this organization. Um, all of us coming from a reservation, we've all been impacted by MMIP in one way or another. And so coming together and really being passionate about, how we can combat this crisis together and creating a much larger team to kind of take on a task that, is so big as this one, is just super important. So like I said, Ohkomi means to use one's voice. We are a 501c3 nonprofit based out of Montana. I'm currently in Missoula, finishing up my PhD here at the University of Montana in Missoula, Montana. And so we provide forensic services to Indigenous communities and families impacted by the missing and murdered Indigenous persons epidemic. One of the main motivations for starting this organization and for myself going into the forensics field in the first place was the disappearance of Ashley Loring Heavy Runner, who was one of my classmates and relatives. And she went missing in June of 2017 from the Blackfeet Reservation in Browning, Montana. And she's still missing to this day. So when I first started college here at the U, I wanted to go into a field that would give back to my home community and to my family. And so that's why I chose to go into forensics so that I could learn, all that there is to learn about forensics and how I could help with some of these MMIP cases and hopefully solve them someday. Another case that I have been helping with is Arden Peppian, who was a 3-year-old that went missing from Browning, Montana, also the Blackfeet Reservation. And this case hit me pretty hard because I also have a 3-year-old son. And so when I first started my graduate program here in Missoula, I was able to go out on recoveries and assist law enforcement in missing persons cases. And I noticed that when I got called out with law enforcement here, we had everyone searching on the ground. There was planes flying over, drones. We had cadaver dogs, just like any resource that was available right here. And people were able to be found, in a timely manner. However, when I went back to the reservation to perform similar services in Arden's case, I come to find out that, we don't have many resources there. Most often it is just the families and family friends that are out searching. And, it shouldn't be that way because, the families are already grieving. They are hurt by, the loss of their loved one. And so in this case in particular, this little girl had gone missing near a river, and she has still not been recovered. So they did do a search for her for about 10 days, I believe. But after that, there has not been much movement. And so we got called in about 2 years ago to assist on this case. And like I said, when I got there, I was kind of expecting, more activity from law enforcement, and that just was not the case. And so that is also what started Ohkomi Forensics, was so that we can be one of the organizations that will get called out and perform these searches and burial excavations if needed, so that the family doesn't have to. We still do have the family on site during these searches if that's what they wish. Um, but yeah, we kind of just wanted to take over that task because it is a really hard task to take on when you're out searching for a missing loved one. Another case that has kind of hit home is that of Jermaine Charlo. So she went missing from here, Missoula, Montana, on June 16th, 2018. And it was actually her last known location was right down the road from where I was staying at the time. Jermaine is around the same age that I am, and she also has two sons, but she has been missing for a long time now. And so when I was going into my master's program, I decided to look at fracture patterns that were associated with intimate partner violence, and how we could see these on skeletal remains, for the purpose of, um, in Jermaine's case, because it is thought to be a possible domestic violence situation. Um, and so I utilized, my time here at the university to gain more knowledge um, in the forensics field, but also, if we were to find the remains of these missing women, missing children, and men, how can we assist further than that? And I'll kind of go more into what I studied in my master's here in a bit. So some statistics I have. According to the National Crime Information Center, a 2016 study reported that 5,712 American Indian and Alaskan Native women and girls were missing at the time of the study. 84% of American Indian and Alaskan Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime, with 56% experiencing sexual violence. More than 1.5 million American Indian and Alaskan Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime. Indigenous women are murdered at a rate more than 10 times the national average. In 2020, non-Hispanic American Indian and Alaska Native people had the second highest rate of homicide among all racial and ethnic groups, with homicide being a top 10 cause of death for American Indian and Alaska Native females between the ages of 1 to 45 and males ages 1 to 54. The bodies of Native American women are 135% more likely to go unidentified than the remains of women of other ethnicities in the US. So I put these statistics on here for those that may be unfamiliar with the MMIP movement. However, I do have to state that, even though these statistics are out there, there is a big possibility that these are an undercount and that these are inaccurate, um, whether that be due to underreporting or racial misclassification, things like that. It's just something to be aware of. According to a study done by Berksika and Cotter in 2023, between 2009 and 2021, 490 Indigenous women and girls were the victims of homicide. According to the MMIP Canada website, historically homicide rates of Indigenous women were almost 7 times higher than those of non-Indigenous females. First Nation women between the ages of 25 and 44 are 5 times more likely than other women of the same age to die as a result of violence. Only 53% of murder cases in NWAC's Sisters in Spirit database have been solved, compared to 84% of all murder cases across the country. Although the true number of victims will unlikely ever be known, current national statistics report as many as 4,000 Indigenous women and girls who are believed to have been killed or gone missing in Canada over the past 30 years. So I also wanted to include statistics from Canada, since we do have relatives from the First Nations in Canada. Being Blackfeet, we do have three other bands that are part of the Blackfoot Confederacy that are in Canada. And so I find it equally important to include these in my presentation. So I guess I did not do a disclaimer at the beginning, but I will do a disclaimer now that the topics that I'll be talking about today are very heavy, and so I do want you to take care while you are listening, even putting this presentation together. And what we are honoring and remembering on this day, May 5th, is really difficult for a lot of us. So just please take care while listening. So the MMIP crisis is not a new thing. Um, this can go all the way back to residential schools um, back in the 1800s, and even during the times of early colonization. So I did want to briefly mention a bit about residential schools or boarding schools and what they are and how they affected us today. So if you are unfamiliar with what residential schools are or boarding schools, they were basically schools where Indigenous children were forced to be removed from their home communities and go away to these schools to learn the more European and colonized way of living. And their main motto was kill the Indian, save the man. And so you can see in this photo here, this is of an individual that went to the Carlisle Indian School, where a lot of our relatives went as well. And these photos are within a 3 years difference. And so you can see basically that Indigenous children were stripped of their regalia, their hair was cut, and they were not able to speak their languages or see their families oftentimes. The document that is in the background is a real document that I know is very hard to read, but the one that is highlighted in yellow is my great great grandmother, Sadie Hagen, who attended the Nebraska Indian School. She was a survivor, but the more that I learn about these things, I realize just how impactful it has been to my family and to my community. So as of July 2024, there are 417 institutions across the United States, 37 states or then territories that have been identified. At least 973 American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian children have died while attending federal operated or supported schools. There are at least 74 marked and unmarked burial sites that have been located amongst 65 different school sites. And so, since not all of these schools have been investigated yet, those numbers are likely to be an undercount. For Canada, there are 140 institutions across Canada that have been identified. Approximately 6,000 Indigenous or First Nations children died while attending these residential schools. And there are at least 966 unmarked graves that have been identified. This is awful. And so when providing these forensic services to Indigenous communities, this is also something that we have to think about when we are coming across cemeteries that may be historic. These could also be missing children that have not been brought home. And so this is why I want to briefly talk about the residential school system and what we're seeing today. So this is kind of an idea of how these unmarked graves may look. And so what they are doing currently to identify these graves is through the use of ground penetrating radar or GPR. And so that's something that we want to incorporate into our organization as well. So it's basically just taking a cart or drones and looking across the land for anomalies that stick out that may be a disturbance in the vegetation. And then ultimately, you can look over the maps and see if these look like possible burial sites, and then they will go through and mark them. So how does this affect us today? Like I said, my grandmother, my grandparents, other family members have gone to residential school, and you can see this be passed down through intergenerational trauma, whether that be mental health issues being seen today, addiction, or violence within our own communities and homes. Um, there's still hurt from family members still missing to this day. So um, my stepdad, his family has an uncle that went to one of these residential schools in the United States and is still missing today. And so, their family is still very hurt over this, and there are several families that are going through that as well. And so, how do we handle the remains today? After we do the GPR, after we have a pretty good idea that there are burial sites here, where do we go from there? So, there are several ethical concerns and debates around the use of DNA and excavation of burial sites. So, it really does depend on the tribe and the community, cultural belief systems as to whether we want to disturb these grave sites or if we want to exhume them and bring them home. Do we want to use DNA to identify who they were so that we can get them back to their family? It really is just all up in the air right now, especially with these residential schools that have Indigenous children from all different tribes. This brings me to another topic of culturally unidentified Native remains being housed in museums, teaching collections, and personal collections. So when I was finishing my master's at the University of Montana, um, I I was told that the building that I had been studying in for the past several years held a collection of Indigenous remains that were unidentified. How we got there is unclear, but this is something that I feel like really needs to be talked about more because these Indigenous ancestors or family members are being kept in these collections, similar to the way that you see in this picture, where they are put in cardboard boxes and just put onto shelves. And that's pretty much it. And with the ethical debates around using DNA, that also brings them to a standstill of, well, how can we get them home if we don't know where they came from? And so that's a lot of what I researched within my PhD program. So when I first started my PhD and heard about these Indigenous remains being housed that could be from tribes all across Montana or even outside of Montana, that there were roughly 30 or less individuals that I knew of. And so, what I thought could be a solution to the rematriation of these remains was to create DNA databases that could be established on each of the reservations or Indigenous communities within Montana. And then we can take DNA from the ancestral remains and then try and match them that way and get them rematriated. However, when I proposed this idea to some of the tribal representatives from other tribes, they were not happy about that. And so I went through a very hard time with that because, I just wanted to help and assist in any way that I could. And I was very passionate about rematriating Indigenous remains and getting them home. And at that point, I was made to feel like I was doing more harm than good um, by offering and presenting that we do DNA analysis. Um, and so I went through a hard time, like I said, and I'll talk more about that. Um, the summer before I started my PhD program, to the point where I almost gave up and just said, if I'm just doing more harm than good, then I don't think I should be doing this at all. But I went home and I talked to my elders back on the Blackfeet Reservation, and they told me, we have people that are still missing, and there is a good chance that our Blackfeet people are being housed in that collection, and so I think you should go ahead and just try and do what you can to get at least the Blackfeet home for now, and then we can kind of go from there. And so at that point, I started working with the Blackfeet tribe specifically on one case of an individual that was found in Glacier County that is thought to be of Blackfeet descent. And so that's what my current project is on now. And so, in doing that, I am forming a genetic database composed of living tribal members that will be used as a reference to compare to unidentified remains. And this database is tribally owned, protected, and maintained. It is being housed or will be housed on tribal lands. And it's only used for the purpose of repatriation or rematriation of both ancestral historic remains and MMIP cases if needed. So, as I was stating about the really hard time that I went through, I was dealing with a lot of mental health issues. Um, and during this time, during this summer, um, I would have to go out on walks and just clear my head. And every time that I was feeling down, I would always see this yellow butterfly. Every time that I saw it, just kind of fluttering by, it always just brought me instant comfort and just a feeling of like, okay, I can do this. I can get through this. And so this is the butterfly that is now seen on the logo of Ohkomi Forensics. It signifies transformation, hope, and healing, and that is everything that I want to bring to my organization and to the Indigenous communities. So to get more deeper into the services that Ohkomi provides, so we do field search and excavation, forensic anthropology lab services, DNA analysis, and MMIP advocacy. So going back to the motto, search, identify, rematriate. For search, we go out into the field, like I said, on cases where there is a missing person that is thought to be deceased, since that is what I specialize in, is forensics. And so we can bring in several other teams. And so I've been looking recently for other organizations that are nearby that we can utilize when that comes to drones, GPR, other sensors that drones may be able to offer, cadaver dogs or human detection animals. And several other entities, just depending on what the needs are of the case. So in this photo on the left, these are not real human remains that are in any of my slides. These are casts. But basically, I was showing the community volunteers at this time what we would be looking for. Unfortunately, so I was kind of doing a presentation. This was on a search for Jermaine Charlo. And so I'm really glad that I was able to lead that search and bring other forensic professionals into that search as well. This photo on the right was a more recent search that we had done. So I'm kind of starting to learn the ropes more of how to organize these searches and make them as productive as possible. And so this search was for Arden Peppian. And so I had brought a team out of about 8 to 10 people. We are doing a line search. We use flags if we find anything. And we have a whole process of doing this. We work in several different types of terrains. And so we work on land, in the water sometimes. And this can be hazardous. And so we want to make sure that we have trained professionals that are out there doing the work, so that, other people are not getting hurt in the process. This photo on the right was a class training that we were doing. So I'm a lab leader for our forensic casework at the University of Montana. And so I was showing the students how to properly excavate a burial site. Also casts that we're working with. But these types of searches that we do and excavations are very, very tedious. And so, we want to make sure that we're not harming any of the evidence or the remains themselves, and that we're documenting everything, every step of the way. or identify. Like I said, we do forensic anthropology lab services. And so, in doing forensic anthropology, basically what we are doing is handling skeletal remains and doing analysis on those remains. We are providing biological information about those remains. So, we are looking for indicators of biological sex. So, if they were male or female, um, looking for an approximate age at death, their stature or how tall they were, and this kind of helps if this individual is unidentified, and then we can, give these reports back to law enforcement and they can compare those to the missing people that are in that area using that biological information that we give them. We also look for signs of trauma, whether that be trauma before before they died or after or during. We don't really report on much um, during the event because we leave that up to the medical examiner and people that are board certified. But we can kind of still assist in that process and tell them what we are seeing, and then that helps them in their diagnosis. Let's see. So this is kind of just looking at what we do. So we can take measurements on the remains, looking at macroscopic features. So just what you can see. Um, and we have several softwares and things and methods that we use to do this work. This photo on the right is going back into my master's thesis when I talked about how I looked at skeletal patterns that were associated with intimate partner violence or domestic violence. So I looked mostly at the zygomaticomaxillary complex, which is a mouthful, but we call it ZMC. And so that's basically just the breakage pattern of the cheekbone that is seen in blunt force trauma to individuals that may have been in domestic violence situation and the surrounding fractures around that. Um, and so when doing that study, I used several databases, but the one that was most helpful was the Arizona Trauma Registry because it stated exactly which cases were from domestic violence. Um, and so when looking at this specific fracture pattern, um, it was stated that it was most commonly seen in Native American females between the ages of 25 to 44 years old, which is unfortunately exactly what I had predicted. So we also do DNA analysis. Um, so when working with um, very degraded DNA or with ancestral remains, we have to go into a clean room and wear Tyvek suits. Um, we have to do things in a very particular way so that we are not contaminating the DNA, especially if we only have a very small amount of it. So this is kind of what it looks like in doing that process. So when doing DNA analysis, there are different types of analyses that we do, and I'll just briefly go over kind of what we're trying to look at. Um, so for autosomal DNA, that's basically the DNA that is shared with your mom, from your mom and your dad and your grandparents. If we're doing tests, just using Y-DNA, that looks at paternal lineage, so your dad, your dad's dad, and so on. Um, and opposite of that, if we are doing analyses on mitochondrial DNA, we are looking at your maternal lineage. Um, we can also do sex chromosomes. So, say, for example, if we have an individual that is unidentified, we can see if they have a Y chromosome, which would indicate that they are male, or if they just have an XX, then they are female. We look at SNPs or single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are just small changes within the DNA that help us to distinguish one person from another. So that is what I am looking at currently within my Blackfeet DNA database. We can also look at short tandem repeats or STRs, which are similar to SNPs, but they are just um, uh, repeats within the DNA sequence that will also help you distinguish from one person to another. This little machine down here on the left is the MySeq FGX, and so that is what I'm using to do forensic genetic genealogy, which is a very popular topic today. And basically, it's using genealogy to help identify unidentified individuals. And so, like I said, if we have a reference database of living individuals, um, and we have no idea who this person is that is deceased, and we want to try and locate their families, we can put that DNA with the reference database into this machine and using their software, and we can look at possible family trees and connections. So it's only looking at familial lineage. It's not looking at any other health factors, because that was one of the concerns that I have gotten from tribal members. So we do not do the whole genome sequencing. We are only targeting specific SNPs. And basically, what this is doing is it's going to put that unidentified individual into a person's family tree that is from the reference database. And then basically, you or a genealogist will go through that living individual's family tree and identify that person that way. So it is very interesting and very helpful. Um, Let's see. And then for rematriate, um, so this is kind of the reason why I like to use the term rematriate rather than repatriate. So repatriation just means the process by which important cultural items and human remains are returned to lineal descendants or descendant communities. Rematriation means to return the sacred to the mother. So by rematriate, we mean give back, but unlike the legal term repatriate, which signifies a simple transfer of ownership, rematriate means something more profound, a restoration of right relationships and a true action of decolonization aimed not just at righting a past wrong, but transforming our collective future. I love that. It definitely gives a lot more meaning to, that we're trying to return our people to their homes, back to the mother, back to their families, rather than just a transfer of ownership. So this is kind of what it looks like after the individuals have been identified, or we know, which tribe they may have come from. I think this was a case from South Dakota, but I am not exactly sure. But basically, once we are able to rematriate those remains, they are able to go through the ceremony and through the process that they need to be put to rest finally. And so this really is the ultimate goal. Um, Another service that we offer is advocacy. I always say that I'm an accidental advocate. So growing up, I've always been super quiet, never really gave my opinion or spoke my mind. But in doing this work and, trying to bring our family members home, bring justice, you kind of have to advocate for them, and for these families, especially for families that don't know, where to turn to, who to call, what their rights are when it comes to a criminal case. And so I have done a lot of advocacy events and have spoke at a lot of webinars and events on campus. So these ones were from last year and a couple years ago at the MMIW or MMIP events that we hold on the University of Montana campus. So some other things, since we have been established, um, Crime Junkie or Audio Chuck has been a really great podcast and ally for us. So last year they gave Ohkomi Forensics a shout out on their podcast, which has millions of followers, and they did an MMIP case for the month of May. I think that they are doing another one for today as well. But aside from that, they also donated $25,000 to us to get us started so we could purchase all of our field equipment so that we could put on advocacy events. And so that was definitely a huge help. Um, I was also appointed as advisory council on the Montana Missing Indigenous Persons Task Force last year, and so I still serve in that role. I'm one of the only forensic individuals that is on that task force. I find that very valuable, and I'm super happy to be included in that process. Um, we also had an individual reach out to us that wanted to do an advocacy event that took several months. Um, Last year, her name is Melissa Skeet, and she goes by Skeet Fighter. She is an ultra trail roller skater that skated from Washington State to Washington, D.C. last year. And in that process, she raised funds for Ohkomi Forensics and just spread the word about MMIP. So that was super amazing. She has a YouTube channel up now so that you can kind of see that process and kind of see how you can get more involved with that. These are just other um, news outlets that have given us shout outs, and um, it was really crazy to me to see how fast Okami Forensics was starting to take off because, for one, I didn't even plan to start my own organization. My plan was always to work in a crime lab or work with law enforcement. But I just noticed that, if I wanted to really advocate for MMIP and really help to investigate these cases and give them the attention that they needed, there just wasn't a place for me within any of the existing systems, I guess. And so that's why I had to just create my own position. And yeah, everyone is kind of catching wind of that. So it's super nice that um, that we're kind of getting that recognition, and that the families are able to tell their stories across these larger platforms. Um, and so, yeah, there has been a lot of media on this, which is great. So in the end, what we hope to accomplish is just make others aware of the crisis that exists within Indigenous communities, whether that be for MMIP or residential school investigations and NAGPRA repatriation. Create solutions in cases where tribal data sovereignty and the use of destructive DNA analysis is a concern for the tribes. So, as I mentioned with the case we're working on with the Blackfeet tribe, hearing all of the concerns that were around data sovereignty, destructive analysis, and doing whole genome sequencing, so privacy concerns, we're able to create real solutions just by consulting with the tribes. And so this is what I tell all of the other professionals that I come across in the forensics or DNA realm is that tribal consultation is key. We can find other techniques that are non-destructive or minimally destructive to do this work, and taking into account cultural belief systems and cultural protocol into our scientific protocols is something that I really, really advocate for. Ultimately, we would like to build one of the first Indigenous-owned forensics labs. Um, as of right now, we are still partnering with the University of Montana's forensic lab, since I'm still here for a little bit longer. Um, but I think the ultimate goal would be to have crime labs on the reservations, so that we can just carry out the work, right within our home communities. Um, but we will see, kind of what happens. Ultimately, our main goal is to bring our relatives home so that our communities can begin to heal. That's always been the main goal. So, with that being said, I would like to thank you all for having me today, and listening to everything that I had to say. Um, my heart goes out to everyone that has been impacted by MMIP. If you would like to contact me for a case, or if you would like to get involved, my email is here, our website, our Facebook page, LinkedIn. You can scan to go to our website. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Haley, for sharing your awesome work with everyone, for sharing the importance of spreading awareness of MMIP. I think Speaking for myself, I learned a lot, and I hope that we can continue to spread the awareness and spread similar work that you do across all across Indian country. If people have questions, feel free to leave them in the Q&A as well as in the chat. I have a question for you before we get started with any others. The work that you do is very important, is very crucial, but it's also very heavy. How do you take care of yourself while dealing with, just all the harshness of it? I know you mentioned going on walks, which kind of inspired, the butterfly, but is there anything else that you do to take care of yourself?
I'm super big on mental health. So I go to counseling regularly, which wasn't something that was really offered to me when I was younger. Um, and so, kind of being away from home now, I realize how many resources we have here, and I'm just really trying to utilize, everything that is here, while also trying to bring that back, to the home communities. So counseling for sure, keeping up with my physical activity as well. So I go to the gym regularly. I haven't this week or last week because I've been super busy trying to graduate, but I feel like that's super important. And then just being in touch with my culture too. So during that time, where I really went through a lot of mental health issues was when I learned how to speak my language and introduce myself. I learned how to pray in Blackfeet. That's when I learned how to bead and make regalia. Because when I was going through that, I was kind of made to feel like basically like I was going through a cultural identity crisis of like, am I even native enough? Like, why are they looking down on me so much? Um, and that's not the case. And so it's really empowering for me now that I can speak my language. I know who I am. And I teach my sons that as well, how important it is to be in touch with your culture. So,
Thank you for sharing that. Um, Someone asked, if they missed the DNA gathering event but have DNA on Ancestry, are they able to send it to you to your database?
yeah. Not at this time because Ancestry has their own database and they have their own set of privacy concerns or policies. And so with the data collection that we did, it was kind of like a pilot study. So hopefully we can do more of that in the future. If there is a family that is wanting to give their DNA, and there are remains that are found that may be their family member, we can do a one-to-one comparison that way. But at this time, um, we're really limited on funding, honestly. And the kits are really expensive, and we don't want the families to have to pay for any of that. So we're doing the best that we can to provide more DNA data collection events.
That you mentioned that you're probably one of the only ones for the Blackfeet Reservation to have this kind of program set up. Have you looked into any of the other tribes within Montana and kind of connected with them if they have any?
I think that the Salish and Kootenai have their own DNA setup, but I don't know if it is for the use of MMIP and repatriation or rematriation. Um, but that is my plan is to kind of reconnect with other tribal representatives or tribal members, and helping them to get their own DNA databases established.
So, is there any more questions in the chat that anyone wants to ask? We'll give it a couple seconds. If not, Haley has left her information there on the slides. So if you guys have questions that come up later, feel free to connect with her and ask if you're kind of shy to do it on here. Um, but I want to thank you again, Haley, for your amazing presentation today of for the work that you do. It's super important for Indigenous communities, Indigenous people, and as well as allies wanting to better inform themselves. That's kind of, what today is about, is spreading awareness and what can people do to um, do more to help. So I want to thank you again to just wrap up today's webinar. I want to thank all the attendees for joining us live and on the recording. And a follow-up email will be sent out soon with the recording of the webinar once we're able to get it all processed for our YouTube channel. So I want to thank you guys all again for joining us today and continue to look into MMIP, continue to wear red and spread awareness. And I thank you again. So
Thank
see you
you.
everyone.